The old lion had been walking toward his death. At 15 years old, his mane was graying, his legs ached with every step, and he knew his time as king was over. He had accepted his fate, to die alone under an acacia tree as all dethroned lions eventually do. But then he heard it, a weak, desperate cry coming from behind a termite mound. What he found there would give his final years a purpose he never expected. A tiny white cub, abandoned and starving, with eyes that held no fear, only hope. This is the story of two outcasts who found in each other exactly what the world said they could never have. If stories about extraordinary bonds between animals touch your heart, if you believe that family is not always about blood but about who refuses to give up on you, then please subscribe to Lion King Stories. Every subscription helps us share more incredible true tales from the African savanna that prove the king of the jungle has the biggest heart in the animal kingdom. These stories matter, your support helps us keep telling them. The Serengeti stretched endlessly in every direction, a sea of golden grass broken only by scattered acacia trees and the occasional rocky outcrop that jutted from the earth like ancient monuments. The dry season had been particularly brutal this year, water holes were disappearing, prey animals were migrating early, and the delicate balance that governed life on the savanna was shifting in ways that favored the strong and punished the weak. This was not a forgiving place, it never had been, but lately it seemed especially cruel to those who could not keep pace with the relentless demands of survival. Tao moved through this landscape with the measured gait of an elder statesman who knew his reign was ending. His name meant lion in the local language, and for nearly a decade he had lived up to it, ruling over a pride of 12 lionesses and siring more than 20 cubs during his prime. His mane had once been so dark it was almost black, a crown of power that made younger males think twice before challenging him. His roar had carried for miles, announcing his dominance to every creature within hearing distance. But that was years ago, when his muscles were hard as stone and his teeth were sharp enough to break the neck of a buffalo with a single bite. Now his mane was threaded with silver, his teeth were worn down to yellowed nubs, and his once powerful muscles had begun to waste away despite his best efforts to maintain them. 3 months ago, 2 young males had appeared on the edges of his territory, brothers barely 5 years old but already formidable fighters with their adult manes just beginning to fill in. They had tested him with small incursions at first, sent marking near his boundaries, roaring their challenges from safe distances, watching and waiting for the moment when age would make him vulnerable enough to defeat. That moment had come 2 weeks ago. The fight had been brief and humiliating. Tao had charged with all the ferocity he could muster, but his legs had not moved as fast as his mind commanded. His reflexes were a fraction of a second too slow, and when the younger male had swiped at his face, Tao had not been able to dodge completely. The claws had opened 3 deep gashes across his left cheek, and the pain had been so sudden and overwhelming that he had stumbled. In that moment of weakness, both young males had pressed their advantage, biting and clawing until Tao had no choice but to retreat or die. That he had chosen to retreat, not out of cowardice but out of the simple biological imperative that drove all living things to survive as long as possible. He had fled his own territory, abandoning the pride he had protected for years, leaving behind the lionesses who would now mate with his conquerors and raise cubs that were not his. This was the way of lions, brutal and efficient, a system that ensured only the strongest genes were passed to the next generation. There was no room for sentiment in nature's design, no pension for retired kings, no gentle retirement where old warriors could live out their days in peace. So Tao had begun the long walk that all deposed male lions eventually take, the journey into the wilderness where food was scarce, water was scarcer, and the chances of survival diminished with each passing day. He had no destination in mind, no plan beyond putting distance between himself and the young males who would kill him if he tried to return. He simply walked, one painful step after another, through country he had once known intimately but now felt foreign and hostile. The wound on his face had become infected. He could feel the heat radiating from the gashes, could smell the sickly sweet odor of corruption that meant his body was losing its battle against the bacteria that had invaded the torn flesh. His vision was blurry in his left eye, and the constant throbbing pain made it hard to focus on anything except the need to keep moving. He was not hunting anymore, he lacked the energy for that. Instead he was scavenging when he could, driving hyenas from their kills or stealing scraps that other predators had left behind. This morning he had found nothing. His stomach was a hard knot of hunger, his mouth was dry despite the small amount of muddy water he had managed to lap from a nearly empty water hole at dawn, and his legs were shaking with exhaustion. The sun was climbing toward its zenith, promising another afternoon of blistering heat that would sap what little strength he had remaining. Tao was searching for shade, a place where he could rest through the worst of the day's heat, perhaps a place where he could finally stop fighting and let nature take its course. The acacia tree he spotted looked perfect for his purposes. It stood alone on a small rise, its spreading branches offering a decent patch of shade, and there were no signs of other predators in the immediate area. Tao changed direction and began climbing the gentle slope, his breath coming in harsh gasps that spoke of lungs that were not getting enough oxygen to tired muscles. He was perhaps 50 meters from the tree when he heard it, a sound so faint he almost convinced himself he had imagined it, a cry that spoke of desperation and the kind of loneliness that comes from being utterly abandoned. Tao stopped walking and listened. His hearing was still good despite his age, one of the few systems in his body that had not yet begun to fail. The cry came again, stronger this time, and his old instincts kicked in. This was not the call of prey, not the bleat of a gazelle or the squeal of a warthog. This was something else, something that triggered memories of his own cubs making similar sounds when they were hungry or frightened or in need of comfort. That he should have kept walking. A dying lion had no business investigating anything except the fastest route to shade and rest. But curiosity was a powerful force, and despite everything he had been through, despite the pain and exhaustion and the certain knowledge of his impending death, Tao found himself altering course toward the sound. It was coming from behind a large termite mound, one of the castle-like structures that dotted the savannah, built over decades by millions of insects and standing as tall as a grown man. Tao circled the mound slowly, his senses alert for any sign of danger. What he found on the far side made him stop in his tracks and stare in confusion and something approaching disbelief. A lion cub lay in the dust, barely moving, his tiny ribs showing through skin that should have been covered with healthy fat. But it was not the cub's emaciated condition that shocked Tao into stillness, it was his color. The cub's fur was white, not the creamy golden tan of normal lion cubs, not even the darker tawny color that some bloodlines carried, but pure white, the color of clouds, the color of bone, the color of nothing Tao had ever seen on a lion in all his 15 years of life: albinism. The word existed in human language but not in the vocabulary of lions, yet every pride knew what it meant when a cub was born without the pigment that normally colored their coat. It meant weakness, it meant the cub would never be able to hunt successfully because prey animals would see them coming from impossible distances, it meant they would suffer terribly under the African sun because their pale skin had no protection from the ultraviolet radiation that could burn and blister exposed flesh. Most importantly, it meant the cub was doomed, nature had made a mistake, and the pride's survival depended on not wasting resources on offspring that could never contribute to the group's success. This cub should have been dead. His mother should have killed him at birth, a quick bite to the neck that would have been a mercy compared to the slow death of starvation and exposure. If she had lacked the strength to do what needed to be done, the dominant male should have stepped in and eliminated the genetic mistake before it could drain resources that should go to healthy cubs. But somehow this white cub had survived long enough to open his eyes, long enough to cry for help, long enough to be found by an old lion who was supposed to be walking toward his own death. Tao approached slowly. The cub's eyes followed his movement. Those eyes were not white or pink as one might expect from an albino, they were a pale blue-gray, the color of storm clouds on the horizon. The cub did not try to run or hide, he simply watched, too weak for fear, too young to understand that Tao could kill him with less effort than it took to swat a fly. When Tao lowered his massive head to sniff the tiny body, checking for injuries or disease that might explain the abandonment, the cub did something that pierced through all of Tao's carefully constructed defenses against feeling anything except his own misery. The cub reached up with one tiny white paw and touched Tao's nose. His pad was dry and hot with fever, and the gesture was so trusting, so completely innocent, that Tao felt something crack in the region of his chest that he knew what he should do. The merciful thing would be to end the cub's suffering quickly, to give him the death his own mother had been unable or unwilling to deliver. One bite, one moment of pain, and then nothing, no more hunger, no more abandonment, no more crying into the empty savannah with no hope of answer. It would take 5 seconds, maybe less. Tao was old, but he was still strong enough to kill something this small and helpless. But Tao did not bite. He could not explain why, even to himself, could not articulate the sudden and overwhelming feeling that finding this cub was not an accident but something that was meant to happen. Perhaps it was because they were both outcasts now, both rejected by the society that was supposed to protect them, both walking toward death with no one who cared whether they lived or died. Perhaps it was because Tao had spent 2 weeks with nothing except his own company, 2 weeks of silence broken only by his own labored breathing, and the sound of another living creature who needed him was too powerful to resist. Or perhaps it was simpler than that. Perhaps he was just too tired of death, too tired of loss, too tired of the endless cycle of violence and abandonment that defined life on the savannah, and this tiny white cub represented a chance to do something different, something that defied the brutal logic that had governed Tao's entire existence. Whatever the reason, Tao made a decision that would change both their lives. He gently took the cub by the scruff of his neck, the way a mother lion carries her young, being careful not to clench his jaws too hard on the delicate skin and bones. The cub made a small sound of surprise but did not struggle. Tao lifted him off the ground and began walking toward the acacia tree he had been aiming for all along. His destination had not changed, but now he was no longer traveling alone. The shade under the acacia was blessed relief from the hammering sun. Tao lowered the cub carefully onto the earth, positioning him in the deepest patch of shadow, then collapsed beside him with a grunt of exhaustion. For several minutes he simply lay there, breathing hard, his infected face throbbing with renewed intensity now that he had stopped moving and his body's adrenaline was fading. The cub curled against Tao's side, seeking the warmth and security of a larger body, responding to instincts that were millions of years old. Tao could feel the cub's heartbeat, fast and fluttery like a bird's, could feel the heat of fever radiating from the small body, could feel the sharp outline of bones that should have been padded with healthy fat. This cub was dying, perhaps more certainly than Tao himself. He was severely dehydrated and malnourished, probably had not eaten in at least 2 days, maybe longer. Without intervention he would be dead by nightfall, his tiny body would shut down, his heart would stop, and the savannah would claim another victim in its endless appetite for the weak and unlucky. Tao closed his eyes and tried to think. He had no milk to feed the cub, male lions did not lactate, and even if he could somehow find a lactating lioness, no female would nurse a cub that was not her own unless forced to do so by extraordinary circumstances. He had no water to offer except whatever he could find in the drying water holes, and the nearest one was at least 2 kilometers away, too far for the cub to walk and too dangerous for Tao to carry him during daylight hours when other predators might see the white fur and attack out of curiosity or hunger. But Tao had something that might be even more valuable than milk or water in the short term. He had body heat and shade and a willingness to share both. If the cub could survive until evening when the temperature dropped and travel became safer, Tao could carry him to water. If the cub could make it through the night, Tao could try to hunt. His skills were diminished but not gone, and even an old lion could bring down small prey if he was clever and desperate enough. If the cub could hold on for just a little longer, Tao could give him a chance, not a good chance, not even a likely chance, but better than lying alone behind a termite mound waiting for hyenas or wild dogs to finish what abandonment had started. Tao spent the afternoon drifting in and out of sleep, his body demanding rest but his mind refusing to fully shut down while he was responsible for something other than himself. The cub slept fitfully, making small sounds of distress that spoke of bad dreams or physical discomfort. Several times Tao woke fully to find the cub had moved away from him, crawling weakly toward the open savanna as if searching for his mother, and each time Tao had to use his paw to gently guide the infant back into the shade and against his body where he belonged. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that seemed to set the entire world on fire, Tao forced himself to stand. His body protested every movement, his muscles were stiff from lying still for hours, his infected face was pulsing with pain, and his hunger had become a constant ache that made it hard to think about anything except food. But the cub needed water desperately, his breathing had become shallow and rapid, his nose was hot and dry, and his tongue lolled from his mouth like a small pink flag of surrender. Tao picked up the cub once more and began the long walk to the water hole he had visited that morning. The journey was harder than he anticipated. The cub was not heavy, but the awkward position required to carry him strained muscles that were already pushed beyond their limits, and Tao had to stop frequently to rest and catch his breath. By the time they reached the muddy depression that passed for a water source, full dark had fallen and the stars were beginning to appear in the vast African sky. The water hole was even more depleted than it had been at dawn, just a shallow pool of brown liquid that smelled of algae and the waste products of the countless animals who had drunk from it, but it was wet and that was all that mattered. Tao set the cub down at the water's edge and watched as the infant instinctively began to lap at the surface, his small tongue making ripples in the murky water. The cub drank greedily, too greedily, and Tao had to gently pull him back before he made himself sick. They would come back to the water several times during the night. Small amounts frequently were safer than one large drink. After both of them had drunk their fill, Tao carried the cub to a thicket of wait-a-bit thorn bushes about 50 meters from the water, a defensive position where they could rest with some protection against predators who might be drawn to the water during the night. He deposited the cub in the center of the thorny barrier, then positioned himself at the entrance, his body blocking the only access point. If hyenas or wild dogs came investigating, they would have to go through Tao first, and even an old dying lion was a formidable obstacle when fighting in a confined space. The night sounds of the savannah rose around them, the distant whooping of hyenas, the bark of zebras warning their herds of predators, the coughing grunt of a leopard somewhere in the darkness. The cub pressed against Tao's back, seeking reassurance that he was not alone, and Tao rumbled deep in his chest, a sound that was part purr and part growl, the same sound he used to make for his own cubs when they were frightened. The white cub responded by kneading Tao's side with his tiny paws, a motion designed to stimulate milk flow in a mother, useless here but comforting to both of them nonetheless. As the hours passed and the night grew cold in the way that African nights do even after blazing hot days, Tao felt the cub's breathing become steadier and his body temperature normalize. The water had helped, hydration was the first step toward recovery, but the cub still needed food, real food, protein and fat to rebuild his wasted body and give him the strength to survive. And that meant Tao needed to hunt. That he waited until the hour before dawn, when most predators had finished their hunting and were seeking shelter for the day, when prey animals were at their most careless, exhausted from a night of vigilance. Tao left the cub hidden in the thorn thicket, gambling that the white fur would be less visible in the darkness and that the thorns would deter any passing predator from investigating too closely. He moved through the pre-dawn darkness with the stealth that came from decades of hunting experience, his pain and exhaustion temporarily forgotten as older instincts took control of his body. That he found what he was looking for near a stand of fever trees, a young dik-dik, one of the smallest antelope species, separated from its group and grazing carelessly. Under normal circumstances this would be too small a target for an adult male lion, barely worth the energy expenditure of hunting, but Tao was not hunting for himself, he was hunting for a starving cub who needed food immediately. The dik-dik was small enough that Tao could kill it quickly and carry it back to the thorn thicket without attracting unwanted attention from scavengers. The stalk was painful, Tao's body screamed at him to stop, to give up, to accept that he was too old and too injured for this, but he pushed through the pain and closed the distance between himself and the tiny antelope. When he was close enough, he charged. His speed was nothing like it had been in his prime, but it was enough to close the gap before the dik-dik could react. He killed it with a single bite to the back of the neck. The small body went limp instantly, death was instant and painless. Tao carried his prize back to the thorn thicket as the first light of dawn was breaking over the eastern horizon. The cub was awake and crying, the sound was stronger than yesterday, fueled by the water he had drunk and the rest he had gotten. When Tao appeared with the dik-dik, the cub's crying changed to excited chirps, his instincts recognizing food even though he had never eaten solid meat before. Lion cubs typically begin eating meat around 6 or 7 weeks of age. This cub looked to be perhaps 4 weeks old, maybe younger, too young by normal standards to digest anything except milk. But these were not normal circumstances, and Tao did not have the luxury of following the usual developmental timeline. He tore open the dik-dik's soft belly, exposing the internal organs that were the most nutritious and easiest to digest, then used his teeth to tear small pieces of liver and heart into cub-sized portions. The white cub attacked the meat with desperate hunger, his tiny teeth tearing at the soft tissue, his face quickly becoming smeared with blood that looked shocking against his pale fur. He ate until his belly was distended, until he looked like he had swallowed a small ball, and then he curled up against Tao and fell into the deep exhausted sleep of a baby who was finally, blessedly, full. Tao finished what remained of the dik-dik. It was barely enough to take the edge off his own hunger, but it was something, and something was infinitely better than nothing. As he licked the blood from his paws and watched the sun climb into the sky, announcing another day of brutal heat and unforgiving survival, Tao felt something he had not felt in months. He felt needed, he felt purposeful, he felt like his life still had meaning beyond just waiting to die. The white cub had saved him just as surely as he had saved the white cub. And Tao, in that moment, made a commitment that would define the rest of his life. He would keep this impossible infant alive, he would protect him from a world that wanted him dead, and he would teach him to be strong enough that his difference became an asset instead of a weakness. It would not be easy, nothing about this situation was easy, but Tao was a king, even if he no longer had a kingdom, and kings did not abandon their responsibilities, especially not when those responsibilities weighed barely 3 kilograms and looked up at him with eyes that held absolute trust. Over the following weeks, a routine emerged between the old lion and the white cub. Tao hunted in the hours before dawn and after dusk, targeting small prey that he could kill quickly and carry back to wherever they had sheltered for the day. Dik-diks became his specialty, along with hares, young warthogs separated from their families, and occasionally a guinea fowl that was too slow to escape his lunging pounce. The meals were small, barely enough to feed one adult lion, let alone an adult and a growing cub, but they were consistent, and consistency was what the cub needed most. The white cub grew with surprising speed once he had regular access to food and water. Within 2 weeks his ribs were no longer visible through his skin, his stomach was pleasantly rounded instead of concave, and his movements became confident instead of weak and uncertain. His fur remained shockingly white, but it developed a healthy shine that came from proper nutrition, and his eyes changed from pale blue-gray to a striking amber gold that looked almost supernatural against his colorless coat. Tao named him Ghost, not aloud because lions do not use verbal names the way humans do, but in his mind, in the way he thought about the cub when they were apart or when he watched him sleep. Ghost because he looked like a spirit, because he should not exist, because he was something between reality and dream, a creature that defied nature's rules simply by continuing to breathe. The wound on Tao's face healed slowly, the infection eventually succumbed to his immune system, and the gashes closed into 3 parallel scars that would mark him for the rest of his life. His body remained thin, he was burning more calories hunting and protecting Ghost than he was consuming, but he was no longer actively dying. Survival had given him a reason to fight, and fighting had given him strength he did not know he still possessed. Ghost learned to walk properly, then to run, his legs growing longer and more coordinated with each passing day. He learned to pounce on beetles and grasshoppers, perfecting the explosive launch that all young predators must master. He learned to recognize danger, freezing instantly when Tao made the low warning growl that meant threat nearby, learning to distinguish between the harmless sounds of prey animals and the dangerous sounds of other predators. Most importantly, Ghost learned that he was safe with Tao, that the old lion would protect him from anything and everything, that he could explore and play and make mistakes without fear of being abandoned again. This security gave Ghost a confidence that most lion cubs took months to develop. He was bold without being reckless, curious without being stupid, and increasingly affectionate toward the scarred old male who had become his entire world. Tao found himself responding to that affection in ways he had not experienced since his own cubs were young. He allowed Ghost to chew on his tail, which must have hurt but which Tao tolerated with patient resignation. He let Ghost climb on his back and bat at his ears, treating the old lion like a piece of furniture designed specifically for cub entertainment. And in the evenings, when the heat of the day had passed and they were resting in whatever shade they had found, Tao would groom Ghost meticulously, his rough tongue smoothing the white fur and removing parasites and dirt, while Ghost purred loudly enough to be heard meters away. But their isolation could not last forever. The savannah was not an empty place. Other lions had territories here, and eventually Tao and Ghost would have to interact with them. That moment came on a morning in Ghost's 3rd month of life, when he was large enough to look like a small adult from a distance but still clearly a juvenile up close, still clumsy in his movements, still possessing the oversized paws and ears that marked him as not fully grown. They had spent the night near a large water hole, one of the few permanent sources that survived even the harshest dry seasons. Tao had been cautious about using this water source because its reliability made it a popular gathering spot for all the area's predators, but Ghost needed a proper bath and Tao needed to drink more than the muddy trickles they had been relying on, so he had taken the calculated risk of approaching during early morning when most predators should have already moved on to their daytime resting spots. They were wrong. A pride was at the water hole, 9 lionesses and 2 young males who were clearly brothers, along with 6 cubs of varying ages. Tao recognized this pride. He had shared boundaries with them when he still had his own territory. They had occasionally clashed over prey or water rights, but generally they had maintained an uneasy peace based on mutual respect for each other's strength. The pride saw them immediately. Tao's dark mane was distinctive even from a distance, and the white shape beside him was impossible to miss. The lionesses rose from where they had been resting, their body language shifting from relaxed to alert in an instant. The 2 young males moved forward, positioning themselves between the approaching strangers and their pride, their tails lashing with agitation. Tao stopped walking when he was still 50 meters away, far enough to signal that he was not an immediate threat, close enough that they could communicate through body language and vocalizations. Ghost pressed against Tao's legs, sensing the tension in the air, his small body trembling with an emotion that might have been fear or excitement or simply the confusion of encountering others of his kind for the first time since his abandonment. One of the young males, the larger of the 2 brothers, took several steps forward and released a roar that was meant to intimidate, meant to establish dominance, meant to ask the question that needed asking, which is, who are you and what do you want? Tao did not roar back. He was not here to challenge anyone, not here to fight for territory or mates. He simply needed water and to pass through without conflict. But the lionesses were focused entirely on Ghost, their ears were forward, their eyes were wide, and Tao could see them looking at each other as if seeking confirmation that they were all seeing the same impossible thing. A white lion cub, pale as bone, standing beside a scarred old male who should have been dead by now. The whispers that passed through the pride were not audible to Tao from this distance, but he could imagine what they were saying. Is that real? Is that a ghost? Is that cursed? Should we kill it? The alpha lioness, the oldest and most dominant female in the pride, made the decision. She walked forward slowly. Her posture was neutral, not aggressive but not submissive either, simply curious. When she was close enough to see Ghost clearly, to take in every detail of his unusual appearance, she stopped and studied him for a long moment. Her amber eyes met Tao's, and in that exchange, volumes of information passed between them. She recognized him as the former king from the neighboring territory, recognized his scars as the marks of defeat, understood that he was no threat to her pride, and most importantly, she seemed to understand that the white cub was under his protection. She made a decision that surprised everyone watching. She dipped her head slightly, not a bow but an acknowledgement, a signal that Tao and Ghost could approach the water, that they would not be attacked, that they were granted temporary safe passage through this pride's territory. It was a gesture of respect, elder to elder, and it filled Tao with gratitude so profound he had to close his eyes briefly to master the emotion. Tao and Ghost approached the water hole slowly, giving the pride time to move aside and create space. The lionesses and cubs watched with open fascination as Ghost drank, his white face dipping into the water, creating ripples that caught the morning light. The pride's cubs were particularly mesmerized. Several of them crept closer despite warning growls from their mothers, desperate to get a better look at the strange pale creature who looked like them but also completely different. One particularly bold cub, a female about Ghost's age with a typical golden tan coat, approached within a meter and made the play gesture that all young predators understand. A bouncing movement with front legs stretched forward and rear end up in the air, an invitation to run and wrestle and engage in the rough and tumble play that was how lion cubs developed their hunting and fighting skills. Ghost looked up at her, water dripping from his muzzle, then looked back at Tao as if seeking permission. Tao's rumble was so quiet that only Ghost could hear it, but the message was clear. Go ahead, make friends, learn to be a lion among lions. Ghost's response was immediate and enthusiastic. He launched himself at the golden cub and they tumbled together in the red dust, biting and clawing with the perfect restraint that cubs their age had mastered, hard enough to practice fighting technique but soft enough not to cause real injury. Within minutes, other cubs joined in. They piled on top of Ghost and each other, creating a squirming mass of golden and white fur that rolled and separated and reformed like a living organism. The adults watched this carefully, ready to intervene if things got too rough, but also recognizing that this was exactly what young lions needed: social interaction, play that taught cooperation and competition, practice for the adult skills they would need to survive. For Ghost, this was a revelation. He had been with Tao for months now, had learned to hunt and fight and survive, but he had never played with other cubs, never experienced the pure joy of rough housing with creatures his own size and age, never understood that he was part of something larger than just himself and Tao. His laughter, the huffing, excited breathing that lion cubs make when they are happy, was the most beautiful sound Tao had heard in months. The play session lasted nearly an hour before the pride began preparing to move to their daytime resting area. Ghost looked up at her, water dripping from his muzzle, then looked back at Tao as if seeking permission. Tao's rumble was so quiet that only Ghost could hear it, but the message was clear. Go ahead, make friends, learn to be a lion among lions. Ghost's response was immediate and enthusiastic. He launched himself at the golden cub and they tumbled together in the red dust, biting and clawing with the perfect restraint that cubs their age had mastered, hard enough to practice fighting technique but soft enough not to cause real injury. Within minutes, other cubs joined in. They piled on top of Ghost and each other, creating a squirming mass of golden and white fur that rolled and separated and reformed like a living organism. The alpha lioness approached Tao again, this time with less formality. She touched her nose to his in the gesture that lions use to acknowledge friendship or alliance, then turned and called to her cubs with a soft grunt that meant time to go. The golden cub who had first invited Ghost to play looked back as she followed her mother. Her expression was disappointed. She had found a new friend and did not want to leave him so soon. As the pride departed, Tao and Ghost remained by the waterhole, both of them processing what had just happened in their own ways. For Tao, the encounter had proven something important. Ghost could be accepted by other lions. His unusual appearance might trigger curiosity or even superstition, but it did not automatically mean rejection or violence. That lioness had seen past Ghost's color to recognize that he was just a cub, and that was enough. For Ghost, the experience was more complex. He had discovered that there were others like him, others who understood the language of play and pack and belonging, but he had also realized that he was different, that his white fur set him apart in ways he was only beginning to understand. The question that would define the rest of his life was already forming in his young mind. Would his difference make him weak as nature seemed to believe, or could it somehow make him strong? Over the following months, Tao and Ghost encountered other prides, other lone males, other predators who had heard rumors about the white lion and wanted to see for themselves if the stories were true. Some reactions were hostile: young males who saw Ghost as an abomination that needed to be eliminated, lionesses who refused to let their cubs interact with the cursed pale creature. But other reactions were curious or even accepting: elders who had lived long enough to know that nature occasionally produced variations that defied expectations, youngsters who saw Ghost as fascinating rather than frightening. Each encounter taught Ghost something valuable. He learned to read other lions' body language, to recognize the difference between genuine threats and empty posturing, to use his intelligence to avoid fights he could not win and to stand his ground when retreat would make him appear weak. And always, Tao was there beside him, the scarred old guardian who never wavered in his commitment to keep Ghost alive and thriving. As Ghost approached his first birthday, he was no longer a small cub, he was an adolescent, gangly and awkward in the way that all teenage lions are when their legs grow faster than their coordination can keep up. His mane was beginning to fill in around his face, not the dark impressive mane that adult males eventually develop, but the fuzzy beginnings that marked him as male and almost grown. And his mane, like the rest of his coat, was pure white, no hint of gold or tan or brown, just pale fur that made him look like he was permanently covered in frost. Tao was aging rapidly, the constant hunting and protecting and traveling were taking their toll. His muscles were wasting despite his best efforts to maintain condition. His teeth were worn down to almost nothing, and his joints ached every morning when he forced himself to stand and begin another day of survival. He knew his time was running short, perhaps months, certainly not years, and he needed to prepare Ghost for a life without him. The answer came from an unexpected source: the pride they had encountered at the water hole all those months ago. The alpha lioness found them one evening. She was alone, without her cubs or pride mates, and her approach was deliberate and purposeful. She stopped several meters away and released a soft vocalization, not a roar but a chuff, the sound lions make to signal peaceful intentions. Tao responded with his own chuff, inviting her closer, curious about why she had sought them out. Ghost watched from behind Tao, his adolescent instincts telling him to be cautious around strange adults, but his curiosity was stronger than his caution. The lioness and Tao communicated in the wordless language that lions use, through body position and ear movement and tail signals and subtle vocalizations that carried layers of meaning. What emerged from that conversation was an offer. The alpha lioness was inviting Ghost to join her pride, not as a dominant male, he was too young for that, but as a subordinate member who would be allowed to remain until he was old enough and strong enough to claim territory of his own. It was an unusual offer. Prides rarely accepted unrelated males, but Ghost's unusual appearance had made him a curiosity in the region, and the alpha lioness understood that having a white lion as part of her pride would make other predators think twice before challenging them. Tao knew this was the right decision. Ghost needed a pride, needed to learn the complex social dynamics that governed lion society, needed to have companions his own age and role models who could teach him things that Tao never could. But accepting this reality did not make it hurt any less. Tao and Ghost had been together for almost a year, had survived impossible odds, had formed a bond that transcended the normal relationship between adult and cub, and now they needed to separate so that Ghost could have the future he deserved. Ghost did not understand why Tao was pushing him toward the lioness, why the old lion who had protected him from everything was now insisting that he go with a stranger, why the safety and security of their partnership was being dissolved. He resisted, pressing against Tao's side, making distressed vocalizations that clearly communicated, "I do not want to leave you, please do not make me go." Tao had to harden his heart in ways he had not thought possible. He nipped at Ghost's hindquarters, not hard enough to hurt but firmly enough to communicate this is not negotiable. He positioned himself between Ghost and the path they had come from, blocking any attempt to retreat. He even growled in warning when Ghost tried to circle around him. It was the hardest thing Tao had ever done, driving away the creature he loved most in the world, but it was necessary. Ghost deserved a pride and a future, and Tao was too old and too sick to give him either of those things. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, Ghost turned and began walking slowly toward the alpha lioness. His head was low, his tail was tucked, every line of his body radiating unhappiness and confusion. He stopped after a few steps and looked back at Tao one more time. His amber eyes were bright with tears. Yes, lions can cry emotional tears when they are heartbroken, and his expression asked a question that Tao could not answer except through action. Tao did the only thing he could do. He turned his back on Ghost and began walking away, forcing himself to keep moving even when he heard Ghost crying behind him. Even when every instinct screamed at him to turn around and gather Ghost close and never let him go, he kept walking until the sounds faded into the distance and he was alone again for the first time in a year. That night, Tao found a small cave and collapsed inside, his body shaking with sobs that came from somewhere so deep they felt like they were tearing him apart from the inside. It was the hardest thing Tao had ever done, driving away the creature he loved most in the world, but it was necessary. Ghost deserved a pride and a future, and Tao was too old and too sick to give him either of those things. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, Ghost turned and began walking slowly toward the alpha lioness. His head was low, his tail was tucked, every line of his body radiating unhappiness and confusion. He had saved Ghost's life, had taught him to survive, had prepared him for a future without his guardian, and in doing so had condemned himself to die alone just as he had been prepared to do before a white cub appeared and gave him one last purpose. The months that followed were the hardest of Tao's life. He had no reason to hunt except to keep himself alive, no reason to seek water except to postpone the inevitable, no reason to wake up each morning except the stubborn refusal to die that all living things possess until the very end. He wandered aimlessly, avoiding areas where he might encounter other lions, avoiding the water hole where he might see Ghost, avoiding anything that would remind him of the impossible year when an old king found something worth living for. That he had given Ghost everything he had left to give, his protection, his knowledge, his love, and his final act of sacrifice was giving him away to a pride that could offer the one thing Tao could not offer anymore, a future. It was the right decision. Tao knew that intellectually, but emotionally it felt like dying, slowly and painfully, one day at a time. 2 years passed. Tao should have been dead long before the end of that period, but something kept him alive, perhaps simple stubbornness, perhaps the faint hope that he might see Ghost one more time. Perhaps just the biological imperative that makes living creatures cling to life until it is literally impossible to continue. He was a walking skeleton now, his mane had fallen out in patches, his eyes were clouded with cataracts, and every step was agony, his joints grinding bone against bone in the way that happens when age destroys the cartilage that is supposed to cushion movement. He was dying, this time for real, not the slow wasting away of before but the rapid decline that comes when major organs begin to fail. He could feel it in the way his heart fluttered irregularly in his chest, in the way his lungs could not seem to get enough air no matter how deeply he breathed, in the way his balance was failing and simple tasks like standing or walking became challenges that required intense concentration. Tao knew he did not have much time, perhaps days, perhaps only hours, and he had made his way slowly and painfully to a place he remembered from long ago, a rocky outcrop that overlooked the entire savannah, a place where kings went to die with dignity when their time came. The view from here was spectacular, kilometers of golden grassland dotted with acacia trees, distant mountains purple on the horizon, the sky vast and empty and beautiful. It was a good place to take his final rest. That he collapsed on the warm rocks and closed his eyes, feeling the sun on his face, listening to the familiar sounds of the savannah, the wind in the grass, the birds calling, the distant roar of another lion announcing his territory. He was ready. He had lived longer than most lions, had sired dozens of cubs, had been a good king when he had a kingdom, and had done one final good thing by saving and raising an impossible white cub who should have died but lived because Tao had refused to give up on him. Tao's breathing was slowing, his heart was stuttering, consciousness was fading, the transition from life to death was beginning, and he felt a strange sense of peace, almost gratitude, that it was ending here in this beautiful place rather than in some dark thicket where hyenas would find him before he was even cold. That he was almost gone when he heard it, the sound of footsteps on the rocks, multiple sets of footsteps, the soft panting breath of lions climbing the outcrop. He tried to open his eyes but his lids were too heavy, tried to lift his head but his muscles would not obey. He was too far gone to fight or flee. Whatever came next would happen without his participation. Something large and warm settled beside him, a body that radiated heat and health and strength, a scent that was familiar but also different, changed by time and maturity but still recognizable to the part of Tao's brain that had been keeping a record of every important smell in his life. It was Ghost, grown now, no longer the white cub but a magnificent adult male lion with a mane as pale as new snow. Tao managed to open his eyes just enough to see, and what he saw made his failing heart swell with emotion so powerful it pushed back the darkness for a few precious moments. Ghost was here. But he was not alone. He had brought the pride with him, the alpha lioness who had accepted him, the cubs who had played with him that first day and were now adolescents themselves. They had all come to the rocky outcrop. How they knew Tao was here he could not imagine. Perhaps Ghost had been tracking him. Perhaps he had never stopped tracking him over these 2 years. Perhaps their bond was stronger than distance or time. Ghost lowered his great head and touched his nose to Tao's, the gesture lions use for greeting and farewell. "For I see you and you matter to me." Tao tried to rumble his acknowledgement, but all that came out was a weak wheeze. His body was shutting down. He had only moments left. Ghost seemed to understand. He shifted position until he was curled protectively around Tao's body, his warmth enveloping the old lion, his presence saying, "I am here with you. You do not die alone. You are not forgotten. You are loved." He could feel it in the way his heart fluttered irregularly in his chest, in the way his lungs could not seem to get enough air no matter how deeply he breathed, in the way his balance was failing and simple tasks like standing or walking became challenges that required intense concentration. Tao knew he did not have much time, perhaps days, perhaps only hours, and he had made his way slowly and painfully to a place he remembered from long ago, a rocky outcrop that overlooked the entire savanna, a place where kings went to die with dignity when their time came. The rest of the pride settled around them, creating a circle of lions, creating a guard that would keep scavengers away, creating a living monument to a king who had saved an outcast. Tao's last coherent thought was that he had succeeded. Ghost was strong and healthy and accepted. He had a family, he had a future. The white cub nobody wanted had become a lion everybody respected. And that was enough, that was everything. Tao had done his job, he could rest now. His breathing stopped, his heart gave one final flutter and went still. Consciousness faded to black. Tao died surrounded by lions, died knowing he was valued, died having made a difference in the world, and that was more than most lions ever achieved. Ghost raised his head and released a roar that echoed across the savanna. It was not a territorial roar or a challenge or a threat. It was grief and gratitude and love all rolled into one sound. It was a goodbye to the old lion who had found him when he was dying and had given him not just life but purpose and strength, and the belief that being different was not a weakness but a gift that made him special. The pride joined in, their voices combining with Ghost's, creating a chorus that carried for miles, announcing to every creature within hearing that a king had died, not the king of territory or pride, but the king of compassion and sacrifice and love that transcended species and status and every arbitrary rule that said some lives were worth saving and others were not. Ghost stayed on that outcrop for 3 days, lying beside Tao's body, guarding it from scavengers, refusing to eat or drink, mourning in the way that lions mourn when they lose family. He could feel it in the way his heart fluttered irregularly in his chest, in the way his lungs could not seem to get enough air no matter how deeply he breathed, in the way his balance was failing and simple tasks like standing or walking became challenges that required intense concentration. Tao knew he did not have much time, perhaps days, perhaps only hours, and he had made his way slowly and painfully to a place he remembered from long ago, a rocky outcrop that overlooked the entire savanna, a place where kings went to die with dignity when their time came. On the 4th day, the alpha lioness gently insisted that he leave, that he rejoin the living, that he honor Tao's memory by being the lion Tao had raised him to be, strong and compassionate and unafraid of being different. Ghost finally agreed. He touched his nose to Tao one final time, then turned and walked down from the outcrop with the pride, his white mane flowing in the wind like a banner, his amber eyes looking forward toward whatever future awaited him. He was no longer the cub nobody wanted. He was Ghost, the white lion of the Serengeti, and he carried with him the lessons that Tao had taught him, that love was stronger than survival instinct, that family was about choice not blood, and that the most powerful thing a lion could do was refuse to give up on someone the world had already decided was worthless. Years later, when Ghost was an old lion himself with his own pride and his own cubs, some of them white like him, proving that his unusual coloring was a genetic trait that could be passed down, he would sometimes climb that rocky outcrop and stand where Tao had died, and he would remember the scarred old lion who had walked toward his death and found instead a reason to live. He would remember being carried to water and fed from small kills and groomed with infinite patience. He would remember being loved unconditionally by a king who had lost his kingdom but never lost his heart. And every lion in the region would tell stories about Ghost and Tao, about the albino cub and the dying elder, about how two outcasts had saved each other and proven that sometimes the most unlikely partnerships create the strongest bonds. These stories would pass from generation to generation, becoming legend and then myth, but always carrying the same essential truth at their core, that love has no boundaries, no rules, no limits, and that every life, no matter how different or unexpected, has value beyond measure. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that compassion can change the world one life at a time, we would be honored if you would share your thoughts in the comments below and tell us about a time when you or someone you know chose to love something the world had given up on. Your stories matter. They remind us all that we are not alone in believing that every creature deserves a chance Subscribe to Lion King Stories for more true tales from the African savanna that prove the king of the jungle has the biggest heart in the animal kingdom. Thank you for being part of our pride. On the fourth day, the alpha lioness gently insisted that he leave, that he rejoin the living, that he honor Tao's memory by being the lion Tao had raised him to be, strong and compassionate and unafraid of being different. Ghost finally agreed. He touched his nose to Tao one final time, then turned and walked down from the outcrop with the pride, his white mane flowing in the wind like a banner, his amber eyes looking forward toward whatever future awaited him.